The witch wound is if you have straight up had some sort of severe torture or trauma that was under the category of persecution specifically for your magical or intuitive or psychic capabilities. During the spirit of this age, one of the largest esoteric wounds that we as a collective are healing, especially for the feminine energy, is the witch wound. So today, I'm going to be explaining exactly what the witch wound is and how it's showing up and manifesting in the spirit of this age. In my video, The Doom Imprint, I talk about how there's trauma that's carried over from past lives, from ancestral realms, from even other worlds, and they all coalesce together to form what I call a doom imprint. Well, one theme within that doom imprint that we're going to hone in on and give the spotlight to today is the witch wound. So let's break down exactly what this theme inside the larger metaphysical trauma in creation, or even just within the doom imprint, is. The witch wound boils down to having to hide or forsake one's own multidimensional power, one's own natural abilities, because it was feared, misunderstood, it was hated, or it brought real harm onto the person. The feminine consciousness is creativity. But what is creativity? At its core, creativity is open and multidimensional. All the other attributes that we assign the feminine consciousness comes from this creativity. If we were to put creativity through a prism and split it all directions, we would see all the different qualities of the feminine consciousness. We would see its multidimensionality. It is sensitive and intense. It is intuitive and inclusive, vulnerable and resilient. It is brought to its creative peak as the binding force we know as love. So, at its core, the witch wound is having to hide our multidimensional power because it is too obscure to exist. Now, first let's start with what is witch, since it's talking about a witch wound. Because many of us might even have themes come up, a part of the witch wound, and we might not even know about it because we don't resonate with being a witch. So, witch means wise. More than that, witch means wisdom, and wisdom is the feminine aspect of God. We're in a masculine age, so naturally we're imbalanced towards hyper masculinity. And because of that, that even transfers over to how we perceive the divine, how we relate, connect with the divine. So what this means for the witch wound is that its very largest origins is not just from this lifetime, not just from a past life where we were a witch and we were persecuted for it, but it traces all the way back to the imbalance that happened within such a masculine age that we're in, which is starting with the fact that the imbalance of viewing the magical, intuitive, wise, aka witch, aspects of God, and we started to view that as less valuable, less divine, lesser than. Even if it's just demoting the feminine aspect of God to, oh wow, you're the portal for creation because you give birth, good for you, God chose you. Even that's demeaning. So because of that, we're in an age where we view everything through the lens of God being masculine. So that in and of itself is the original wound that the witch wound traces back to, even though many people who have the witch wound wouldn't even consider that, they wouldn't even think about it. They'd probably be just tuning in to a past life, or sometimes even just earlier in this life, where there was a severe trauma around them being in some form of persecution over their intuition and therefore they're magical, because that's what the intuition is. It's the non-invisible information, the psychic information that we receive. So therefore having some sort of fear and some sort of persecution around the psychic ability of the intuitive powers. I'm saying intuitive powers because men have intuition and psychic abilities too. So even though this is the feminine aspect of creation, the feminine aspect of God or source or the universe or the multiverse, whatever you want to call it, it's the feminine aspect is the one that is known as having magic. And magic simply in this case, I'm not referring to magic in any one specific way because there's many different forms of magic. In this case, what I'm talking about feminine power being magic is the fact that it is nonlinear. And because it is nonlinear, it's magical because it cannot give you a straight answer. It cannot give you the acoustic, bare bones, intellectual breakdown of how it received that information. It cannot give you the concrete data for how that information was received or transmitted or found out, discovered. So because of that, it's not only weird, it is magical in the sense that it's just non-visible. So in this case, which is just the non-physical information. And so in that case, men and women have the ability for magic, they have the ability for psychicness and intuition. But when we're talking now about the witch wound and how people carry that in this age, what specifically is that doing to them? How is that manifesting as some sort of wound around the witch or the feminine power? How it's manifesting is as autoimmunity. Having such severe persecution for their intuitive, for their weird, for their wisdom powers in the past, whether that was actually their past life or whether that was a part of the ancestral lineage that they incarnated into, or whether it was even just a very similar theme of persecution for their feminine magic that was carried out even if it wasn't a part of this realm. The thing about the witch wound is that it's coming from persecution and trauma. So the trauma and fear of what once had happened that's carried a cellular memory. So that cellular memory of information, that's what cellular memory is. It's the stored information of the past. That cellular memory holds within it that if a person steps into their magic, or if a person steps into their intuitive, psychic abilities, then there will be some sort of physical consequence. It's not just like, oh, people are rallying against you. It's not verbal. I would even say the witch wound is specifically about everything that had to do with physical wounds. Some sort of physical way of shutting down that person, some sort of physical way of persecution. So they're being actual, not just mental or emotional trauma. They're being physical trauma, whether it's torture, whether it's just some sort of sentence that was given for persecution against them, whatever it may be. I've even seen in some people's energy fields when I'm doing healings, them being beheaded for it. So I am not talking about the witch wound from if you were bullied. That's something else, and that's valid, but that's not the witch wound. The witch wound is if you have straight up had some sort of severe torture or trauma that was under the category of persecution specifically for your magical or intuitive or psychic capabilities. So essentially, the witch wound is inseparable from persecution. The witch wound could not exist if it were not for persecution. And not just any form of persecution. This is specifically persecution that aims to make the feminine energy of weird, of wisdom, of intuition, of magic, of psychic. It makes it want to not exist. That form of persecution. Now, when we come into that, for whether you believe yourself to have it or whether it's just a part of the ancestral matrix that we carry or whatever have you, I've even seen this from off planet, like I said. So this theme of persecution around psychic or just otherworldliness, weirdness, is not even exclusive to this dimension. So we enter into this age where healing is one of the core and central themes for this entire age. And now many of us have the witch wound. So we're looking at our point of attraction and noticing very common repetitive themes of persecution, even if it's not at that level where the cellular memory was created from, where it was physical torture or trauma. That imprint, that memory is still there. So how is it manifesting? We know already it's from autoimmunity. And where is the most prevalent form of autoimmunity? The thyroid. Well, the thyroid is very synonymous. It's very connected with the throat region, the throat center. So let's think of what that energy center holds and how the throat center is connected deeply with the witch wound. The throat center is a portal. It's a portal because we use vibration, which is the voice, through the portal of the throat center. And so this energy center carries a large responsibility to connect the higher spiritual centers and the lower spiritual centers, to connect the higher worlds and to connect the lower worlds. So because of that, it's a central place where the inner world meets the outer world through voice. We speak our truth, we speak what's happening in the inner world. That means that if we are having some form of persecution, or we had some form of persecution in the past, specifically about conveying higher, non-physical, invisible realms to the lower worlds, that then the throat center, being that portal where that is spoken through, is now targeted and persecuted, then that's going to show up in some narrative as some form of ailment or some form of disease. Some form now very prevalent in our age of autoimmunity. And there's going to be some story behind it, but really it's coming from this larger metaphysical trauma, this larger metaphysical imprint that is being healed through the spirit of this age, but that is showing up predominantly through the portal of the throat center. So that's why people who have the witch wound have the common theme. This is one of the clearest indicators of the witch wound. It's fear of speaking your truth. The fear of speaking the truth. Why? Because speaking is what got you in trouble in the first place. Or speaking is what got you in a lot of physical pain or a lot of physical trauma in the first place. You can't have a witch wound that came from not speaking. You cannot speak now in this lifetime because of the witch wound. That's how it manifests. It manifests as shutting down the throat center, saying, don't go there. We know what happened last time, sheer brute violence. But how a person or how the energy complex and the energy field of that person acquired that witch wound in the first place, it was from speaking. So a person can't even have gotten that imprint if they had not used their throat center at one point in time. So because of that, the throat center is shut down. That's the number one manifestation of the witch wound and how it's playing out, because a theme will always show up in different layers of reality. It's not just going to show up at the physical level. And so each way that a trauma shows its manifestation, or each way that a trauma expresses itself will be different depending at what level or layer of reality it's in. So at the physical level, it's going to show up as a physical ailment. And so that's typically why we see women and autoimmunity go rampant, but specifically, it's autoimmunity as a whole, but really it's the most prevalent autoimmunity is a throat center one. It's Hashimoto's, it's thyroid one. Now, to be fair, there is a lot of men that also have autoimmunity and it's going on the rise as well, but there's a stigma around men reporting autoimmunity. And because of that, there's not the same amount of accurate statistics for men because of that stigma. So men also have an issue with these themes as well. Autoimmunity and other mystery health conditions may not come from just this lifetime. They may originate from a universal trauma that is taking place in the above. As above, so below. They originate with service to self beings trying to dominate this entire universe by oppressing the feminine aspect of all of our consciousness, because the feminine aspect of consciousness is needed to awaken into our sovereignty. At the surface level, our health is a reflection of either our conscious or poor choices in diet and lifestyle. Beyond that, environmental pollutants, stressors, and the quality of our support system all continue to play a factor. But at a deeper level, spiritual ailments come from archetypal traumas in the collective unconscious. These traumas create a complex of forsaken, bitter, misunderstood, persecution, and shame. This is the large psychic wound that is being played out and healed in this age. So we carry within us masculine and feminine energy. Now, when we carry within us the witch wound, that can definitely show up in a man, but it's still a feminine wounding, still within a man. Or if it's in a woman, it's still a feminine wound. And then the second energy center that the witch wound is impacted and affected by is the willpower. It's our ability to be visible. So for us to be visible to the world, our ability for visibility is where the witch wound shuts that down. It makes us want to hide or be invisible. So we shut down the willpower when we have the witch wound and we're overrun by it, because it's safe to not be seen. What happened last time we were seen? So we don't want to be visible because, once again, the witch wound is there trying to make us safe and trying to make us not persecuted, because it carries within it that cellular memory of being visible and speaking. So the willpower is the second energy center that is most impacted by this witch wound. So anytime that we don't move in the direction that we want to move into, and we don't be visible the way that we want to be visible, we can't fully be able to align with our dharma or our purpose or any sense of meaning, because we have operating within us the distortion to keep us invisible, or to keep us not speaking the truth, whatever that might be for a person. So even if our truth is completely out of reality or whatever have you, nothing can get purified, nothing could get healed if it's not already being able to express. So that's why so much of this age has to do with healing, but also healing in a way where things are figuring itself out. Things are being expressed. And that expression, if it was shut down in the witch wound, isn't going to probably be perfect, nor should it have that expectation or that pressure on it. So when it comes to healing this witch wound, start where you are. Be hyper, compassionate, and gentle with yourself. Because what it needs is that safety of knowing that it just is going to get expressed, or it's just going to be seen. And then whatever the consequences are for speaking or for being seen, that will have its own journey. But not giving the witch wound the chance or the opportunity to even go through that arc is what is shutting it down, stunting the maturity of our life path or of our soul's development. So at this point, if a person feels like they're being overrun by their witch wound, or they've identified that they have a very hard time or difficulty being seen or standing and speaking in their truth, how we can temper this, how we can start to resolve this, is by looking first at what is the most loving thing we can do. Allow ourselves to go through the imperfection, through the hyper messiness of a healing journey, which is just allowing ourselves to speak and be seen. And that alone is not going to be easy, is not going to be smooth, but just allowing ourselves, having that grace to be messy, having our grace to be seen. And then from there, dealing with that. And then from there, dealing with that. Just allowing ourselves a journey. What's more important, that or staying safe, which is not safe at all, by staying stunted in that maturity, in that immaturity? Because what ends up happening if the witch wound does not get healed within the spirit of this age is it ends up turning into a more shadowy energy that then cannot at a certain point progress or evolve any further. A lot of the times, the only way that this witch wound can truly, fully heal is if it experiences persecution. Because just like homeopathy, some of that poison or some of that particular specific pain that provoked that wound in the first place is needed, is required to be the catalytic converter, to literally be introduced once more so that a new outcome can arise. So what that means is that, not that we go seeking it, but if a person has a witch wound, that's already something that their energy field has as a point of attraction, but it's for healing. And so in psychology, we would call that now a disconfirming experience. And when a person who has a witch wound of persecution now is looking to heal that, they're going to go and seek, whether they know it or not, situations where that original persecution is now being played out, but on a lesser degree. So it won't be like torture, or it won't be at the degree of severity of that original wound, but it will be some form of persecution played out. Only now, the things around them aren't the things that may change, but they will just stay in their ability to be visible or their ability to speak their truth. And that's what changes. It's the ability to stand in a new experience of the same thing. So it's the same thing where a person was speaking or a person was being seen for their magic or their psychic, their intuitiveness. And now they are being persecuted, only this time the persecution doesn't change, but the person's reaction, the person's ability to be in that persecution is the thing that changes. So that in and of itself is what converts or what changes. That's what transmutes the witch wound. It's the ability to now just have the same experience, but now it's still not the same experience. It's disconfirmed, meaning there's a new outcome. So a disconfirming experience means that now you're in the same environment as the trauma. So you're in the same environment of whatever that trauma is, only now there's a different or new outcome. And disconfirming experiences are the way to heal the witch wound. The shadow side of the witch wound pits one person against another person for their survival. This is more than simple competition for resources. This is where one prisoner starts policing other prisoners, so to speak. In fact, this is the biggest theme you will see triggered in others from holding the witch wound. You will see more invisible oppression from power structures, but you will more often visibly see people who also hold a wound of being a witch explicitly trying to police others who are also being persecuted. It would be funny if it weren't horrific. This dynamic of offering up each other for sacrifice to control systems is the real crux of this collective wound and where to begin healing this imprint. And so the quantum field was known as what weird came from. Weird is a Celtic term for loom and the fates. And so what were the fates? They were 3 goddesses of fate or personal destiny. So what does that mean if they were these 3 goddesses that had loom or fates? That's the quantum field. That is what we would consider today the quantum field, and that's what the feminine energy is. It's nonlinear energy. It's the nonlinear, magical quantum field. So because it's this pure potential, and it's psychic, that energy is less definable. It's less able to be cut and clear. So it's harder to be able to perceive as something linear. And if we need to wrap our heads around something and the quantum field don't make no sense, then that's weird. Get it? You see, that's odd. And that's the feminine power. I hope this has helped you heal your persecution. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.